Hey, it's Kai. I am coming at you today with a readathon wrap-up that is 3 months overdue. This is for the Asian Readathon from this May, hosted by Cindy from Read with Cindy. So I don't typically do readathons very often. I don't like to participate in them much because I personally don't like having to read books in a set period of time because deadlines make me nervous. But I wanted to participate this year because I was going crazy in my house. So yeah. So the prompts for this year's Asian Readathon were quite simple. There were 4 challenges. All in all, there was read any book by an Asian author, read a book that features an Asian character or written by an Asian author who you can relate to. So whether this is something based off of a demographic that you mutually belong to, like being of the same like ethnicity or the same sexuality, etc., or just someone that you can relate to on like an emotional level. The 3rd challenge was to read a book featuring an Asian character or written by an Asian author who is different from you, for the same reasons as previously stated. The 4th was to read a book that was recommended by an Asian person. And then the 5th challenge, which was an optional one, is to read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I did not do that one because 4 books was already kind of a challenge for me, honestly. I usually, when I'm a pretty slow-paced reader, so I usually average like 2 to 4 a month, if that. So yeah, I am planning to read it at some point though, so yeah. Alright, so the first read that I did for this readathon was actually a reread. I read this first during summer of last year. For most of these, I used books that I already had on hand because I couldn't exactly go to a local library at this time. And there was one that I bought and had shipped to my house, but other than that, it was all books previously owned. So my first book was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by vuong. I adore this writer. I am a big fan of his poetry, and I found that his poetic style and voice carried over really well into his prose writing. I ended up giving this a 4 or 5 star, I forget which, but I really appreciated it. I thought it was a fantastically well written and poignant story, written from like an autobiographical point of view. So yeah, I would recommend picking this up. I believe this is a release from maybe last year. It's recent at the very least. So I reread this to satisfy that first challenge, which is just read any book by an Asian author. So why not reread something that I enjoyed from an author that I enjoy? The second book that I read for this challenge is P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. Everyone on Earth, I'm pretty sure, knows of the book / Netflix adaptation To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and this is the sequel to that. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think I gave the first book a 4 star, and I gave this one a 4 star as well. I really enjoy this book. I think it's just kind of like the quintessential like rom-com type book, and bonus points for actually centering an Asian girl as the focal character. So I don't really have much to say about P.S. I Still Love You that I don't already have to say about the OG To All the Boys I've Loved Before. It's cute and I love it. I liked the sort of, I think I enjoy the sort of like love triangle situation in this book better than the first book, because I found the kind of rival love interest more likable than what's his face, her sister's ex. But yeah, something I consistently appreciate about these books is how like centered on family they are, because they are romances, but Lara Jean's family plays such like a huge role in the books that I think it's just I think it's very nice and just very touching. So yeah, that worked out pretty well for me too. I did this one was to satisfy the third challenge. Read a book featuring an Asian character or written by an Asian author who you're different from. And Lara Jean is Korean American and I am Filipino American, so that's that. The third book that I read for that month, May, yes, was also a sequel, but it did not work out quite as well. This is Girls of Storm and Shadow. I gave this a 2-star, which is a shame because this is the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire, which I actually ended up giving a 4-star because I really enjoyed the first book. If you don't know already, I think this book has gotten like a fair amount of buzz on BookTube, but this series rather, is about a girl named Lei who lives in like a fantasy universe that's very rigidly defined by a caste system. At the top of the caste system are Steel, which is basically just walking demons, like animal-based demons. They're like vaguely anthropomorphic, but they're mostly animal. The mid-caste is comprised of people who are mostly human, but they possess demonic characteristics. And then at the like very bottom of the social structure are Paper, which is essentially just vanilla humans, and that is where Lei is. She's just a person. And Lei is kidnapped one day and kind of forced alongside other Paper girls to become a concubine for the Demon King. So I gave Girls of Paper and Fire a 4 stars. I thought it was a very solid like YA fantasy read. And I think one of my favorite aspects of it was how the romance like pleasantly surprised me. It was less so how the romance itself was written, more so the existence of it, because going into it, I went into the book completely blind, and I was worried that it would be kind of like a lot of people these days kind of structure their romances and their YA fantasies to be like a kind of Beauty and the Beast retelling, where like this immensely powerful and cruel man kidnaps or otherwise coerces the female lead to like live with him or be in close quarters with him anyways. And it's kind of about like her learning that he's not that bad of a guy. And I feel that a lot of times the way they're written, it's very hard to write this kind of like romantic arc, I feel, in a way that is not wildly misogynistic, because oftentimes when people try to write something like that, it comes off where there is like a huge power imbalance that just stays that way for like the duration of the narrative. and the onus is always on the woman to kind of weasel out the redeemable qualities of the man, even though she is in a position far lower than him and has a lot of reason to like fear him. So I was kind of scared that it would be a situation where like Lei is like forced into like this position to be like a concubine to the Demon King, and as she gets to know the Demon King, she learns that he's not that bad a guy after all in the end, and they fall in love. So when it turns out that the romance in Girls of Paper and Fire was actually between Lei and another concubine, it was very satisfying on a couple levels, both in that I was expecting this very kind of tropey thing, and instead I got like a romance where it's people on like kind of equal grounds in terms of their positions, and also that it was between two women, which I often like, I don't see often in books that don't openly advertise that. So I really liked that. So I chose Girls of Storm and Shadow on basis of the second challenge, which is read a book featuring an Asian character or written by an Asian author who you can relate to. So I chose this on the basis that the protagonist is a lesbian or a bi woman, and her love interest is a woman. But sadly, I feel like this book was a bit of a downgrade from the first book. I felt that the change in setting was very much a weakness to it. The first Girls of Paper and Fire book is spent kind of in the court, and it takes place entirely through Lei's perspective as she navigates the court and kind of is introduced to all the characters there, including her fellow paper girls and also like other demons and mid-caste kind of demons who are in the court. And I felt like that was like a very solid kind of place to center it in. Meanwhile, this book is kind of like one of those things in revolution-based series. This, yeah, they're doing like a revolution. Obviously, if the caste system thing didn't tip you off. So it's basically like a road trip, which I find that it's hard to do road trip books well. Basically, they're just kind of bouncing from location to location, and I find that the supporting cast of the second book is not as strong as the first, because in the first book I liked how Lei kind of bonded, for better or for worse, with her other paper girls, and how you could kind of like see different kinds of relationships that could manifest from being in such a similar position and being kind of like the only people in the court who are on the same level, while everyone else in court kind of sees you as basically subhuman, or like a sex object. So I thought that was pretty cool. The kind of crew in the second book is basically like your basic like rebel group who is accompanying Lei and her love interest Ren as they kind of journey about trying to get a one-up on the Demon King. So yeah, I feel like the supporting cast and the setting were both kind of not as good as the first book. And in addition, this book kind of introduces multiple perspectives for that reason. The first book was very firmly rooted in Lei's point of view, but in this book you get point of view chapters here and there from different supporting characters. And I feel that the author did this out of necessity, because since Lei has escaped from the palace and is kind of just on the run, you would need to convey what is going on back at the palace, even though Lei is no longer present there. So I get it, but at the same time I feel like it's very clear that those like point of view chapters from like Aoki and whoever the fuck are just kind of like there to tell you what's going on in court, and not because their points of view actually contribute anything of worth to the story. The other thing I took issue with is kind of in the second book, I feel like Lei's narrative, every 20 seconds she takes like a full like minute to like reminisce about how like strong and amazing and like diverse and powerful the women in her life are. Like she just does like a whole monologue about it, and it feels like a prominent step down, because I feel like if you need to deliver like your like thesis statement like in like a monologue to the reader, it's not really doing a good job in the story like presenting itself. So I don't know, because she would literally like just sidetrack from the story to kind of remind you that feminism, and like I feel like just presenting us with well-written female characters is enough. You don't have to like keep doing this. And oh my god, okay, this last thing is a pretty big spoiler. I think it comes like more than midway through this book, so if you haven't gotten a chance to read this yet and you want to, skip to when I put this down. Okay, so in Lei's little like rebel party, there was like a side romance between two of the like male side characters who are in her kind of retinue, and I feel like the romance itself was kind of underdeveloped, because they tried to do kind of like a enemies to lovers, hate to love type thing, but it just felt like it kind of like on a dime did that. So I feel like the romance itself was kind of written just to be there, and then like I think in like the last third of the book, one of the male characters in the couple is very suddenly killed off, and I feel like not only was the character himself and the romance itself underdeveloped, but I feel like the death was kind of done just to be like a shocking thing that happens and causes a rift in the group. Like it doesn't serve any like meaningful purpose beyond that. Like it makes characters sad and it makes the characters do stuff, so it's effective in that way, but I feel like I didn't know the guy well enough to feel anything other than like, oh, I know what you're doing here type of thing. So yeah. Okay, spoiler is over. Wait, no. I'm still doing spoilers. Do not. Okay, I hated the ending also. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I hated the ending. I know that this is a probable trilogy, so I know a lot of times in trilogies, the second book is kind of like the weakest, but I feel like the kind of cliffhanger that is introduced at the end of this book is stupid. I think that it was built up to sufficiently, but the way that it was executed felt very like, this is a cliffhanger. This is so you will read the last installment. This is a temporary predicament, etc. Like, I'll give it leeway. I'll give it leeway for being the second book, but that doesn't change the fact that as a book, like its own thing, the ending just sucked. Okay, spoiler is over. So I don't know, I probably will pick up the next installment of the series just to kind of figure out what happens. I am intrigued enough by the premise set up by the first book that it having like a shitty sequel doesn't super ruin it. So yeah, this was probably like my lowest rated of the month. So yeah. The final book I don't have with me. I own it. I know that I own it, I just can't find it because I am very well organized and put together. The fourth and final book that I read for the Asian Readathon is actually an older one, and one that had to be translated to English. It is Notes of a Crocodile. It is set in 1980s Taipei, and it kind of follows this like anonymous lesbian narrator nicknamed Lazi as she kind of goes through her life in university and post-university with a group of like friends that she meets over the years who are also LGBT. And I didn't really know how to rate this one because it is undoubtedly a very important book, and the late author is very kind of well known and respected for being one of the first kind of LGBT, specifically lesbian authors on the scene. And the translation was beautiful. The translator did an excellent job of kind of articulating all of like the little nuances. So yeah, I don't really know how I'd rate it because I don't know how much enjoyment I got out of reading it. Like, it is objectively very well written. I thought that the kind of critiques of capitalism were delivered in a very interesting way, and I don't know, I thought it was good, but I don't know how much I enjoyed it. I don't think it's because I don't enjoy literary fiction, because I do, and I typically enjoy books that are less so like a clear plot and more so kind of like an extended character study. I think most of the issue was I don't know how I felt about the narrator's voice. I think the main issue is I take particular umbrage with narrators that have like a pretentious tone to them, a very specific tone that's like, I am a disillusioned intellectual in college, stuff like that. And Lazi, the narrator, was very much that, and so were her friends. So I had kind of a hard time like connecting with them, even as I like appreciated the book as a whole. So I didn't really know what to do. I gave it a 3 stars, even though I would maybe objectively bump it up a little higher, but yeah. So yeah, those are the books that I read for the Asian Readathon. I would kind of like to participate in more of these because it was fun kind of picking and choosing which books I would do for each challenge. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for books written by Asian authors or writers, or books that center on Asian characters, Just let me know in the comments down below. That'll be it for today. I'll catch you later.